Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror and thriller film called Record for Apocalypse. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Due to an outbreak, an apartment building is under quarantine and soldiers are sent to detonate the building. Inside, they're met with pools of blood. With firearms ready, the soldiers searched apartments and set up bombs to prevent the virus from spreading. After setting up bombs, Guzman and Lucas rush downstairs but are met with an infected firefighter who attacks their comrade. They immediately shoot it, but more infected arrive. When the infected are shot dead, the soldiers turn to their bitten colleague. The man pleads for help from Guzman, who is also a doctor, but is shot down due to protocol. The shooter reveals that he's also infected, so he gives Guzman his gun, urging him to shoot him. After Guzman shoots their infected comrade, they hurry to leave, but a woman calls for help from above. Lucas stresses that they don't have time as the bomb will detonate. Still, Guzman runs up the stairs in search of the survivor. With 1 minute left until detonation, Guzman finds the TV reporter Angela. Eventually, Angela wakes up, strapped to a hospital bed. Dr. Guinard tells her the restraints are to keep Angela from harming herself. He asks if she remembers what happened in the building, but Angela claims she doesn't, so the doctor takes a blood sample to ensure she isn't infected. Meanwhile, Guzman finds himself in a ship cabin, confused. Outside, he encounters an old woman who thinks she's at a wedding venue. Not knowing where they are, Guzman tells her to stay while he looks for answers. At the laboratory, Guinard hands Angela's blood sample to Dr. Ricarte. Guinard notes that they've tested her 3 times already, but Ricarte stresses that Angela was trapped in the building for 6 hours, so they must take precautions. Meanwhile, Angela complains about her straps, so the assistant doctor loosens them. Immediately, Angela slips her hand out and reaches for a container to smack the doctor. She runs away, so a soldier sounds the alarm. The soldiers chase Angela through the corridors, but she runs into a dead end. However, the soldiers trip when the cook, Edwin, pushes a food cart in front of them. Angela jumps over the soldier but bumps into Guzman. The soldiers hold them at gunpoint, so Guzman helps her up the stairs. They get surrounded on the deck, but Ricarte arrives to notify the soldiers that Angela and Guzman are clean. Ricarte promises not to restrain Angela, so she reluctantly agrees to be taken to her cabin. Afterward, Guzman demands answers, so Ricarte explains that he and Lucas were sent there for isolation, given that there was another outbreak at a wedding in Barcelona. Lucas is still undergoing tests, but Ricarte promises that he'll be released soon. He then introduces Guzman to Ortega, the ship's captain, who shows Guzman around. Inside the bridge, Guzman meets Goro, the ship's officer. When the lights flicker, Goro complains about how the medical equipment overloads their generator, hence the constant blackouts. Meanwhile, Nick, the radio operator, spies on the security camera in Angela's cabin. Ortega drops by to introduce him to Guzman. Nick tells him that only the doctors have access to outside communication and lifeboats, so they can't communicate outside without their permission. Doubling as an IT technician, Nick is recovering footage from Angela's camera under the doctor's orders. Guzman mentions that he saved the camera with Angela. Excited, Nick says he's Angela's fan and wants to meet her. In the engine room, the worker, Jesus, reports trouble, though he's working on it. In the dining room, Lucas sits with the old woman, who asks for milk. Lucas asks Edwin for milk just as Guzman joins them at the table. Guzman relays that there are no lifeboats and radio traffic while there's a laboratory within the ship. He concludes that the doctors are hiding something, hence the extra security. Later, Nick shows Guzman the retrieved footage from Angela's camera. Guzman compliments his work and asks if Nick has access to the security cameras. Confidently, Nick shows him that he does, so Guzman asks to see the laboratory. Nick points out that the entrance is locked with a passcode, but he still gained access to the cameras. Seeing the lab, Guzman asks what they're doing, but Nick only knows that they've brought cages aboard. Guzman notices a guarded door within the lab. However, Nick says no cameras are inside. At night, Angela caresses her torso when she feels slithering inside her stomach. Startled, Angela wakes up, realizing that she was dreaming. Blackout suddenly happens, so Angela exits her cabin. In the engine room, 2 soldiers complain to Jesus about the blackout. While they ridicule him, Jesus stands his ground, making them leave. Meanwhile, Guzman bumps into Angela just as the power returns. The next day, Guzman takes Angela to the bridge to introduce her to the crew. Nick gets flustered upon meeting her. When Guzman mentions that Nick is recovering footage from her camera, Angela freezes, seemingly concerned. Nick shows the footage he has recovered so far, and Angela studies the footage intently. The whole film is finally recovered, so Nick begins processing it. At the lab, scientists open the guarded door only to find that the host is gone. Ricarte checks the bed inside and notices that the straps are still intact, concluding that someone set the host free during the blackout. Ricarte gathers his men to find the host, hoping the serum will work. Meanwhile, Edwin is busy when a sudden clattering disrupts him. A ladle suddenly falls, so he starts looking around. He doesn't notice an infected monkey behind him until it attacks. After wrestling with it, he throws the monkey on a hot pan and sears it to death. After getting complaints about the lack of food, Goro checks the kitchen and spots Edwin standing still. He doesn't notice that Edwin's infected, so he tastes the food before taking the cart. Lucas, Angela, and Guzman arrive at the cafeteria after Goro, and the soldiers have finished eating. When Lucas sits with the old woman, she says she wants pasta, so he goes to the kitchen. Seeing Edwin inside the storage, Lucas opens the door to ask for the old woman's meal. However, Edwin turns around and attacks him, so Lucas smashes his head on the door before pushing him back inside. After locking Edwin inside, Lucas runs back to the dining room, warning the others not to eat. Lucas tells them about Edwin just as Ricardo and his men arrive. Ricardo asks where Edwin is and allows Guzman to come alongside Guinard. At the bridge, Goro starts feeling sick. Meanwhile, Ricardo tells Guzman that they're working on a serum for the virus. Surprised, Guzman thought the virus was a mystery, but Ricardo confesses they've acquired a virus sample and injected it into the monkey. After being given a taser, Guzman is instructed to electrocute Edwin. Ricardo opens the door and Guzman immediately shoots Edwin, knocking him down. Ricardo quickly injects the serum into him and observes the effects. However, Edwin becomes hostile again, so Ricardo runs away. After locking the storage, Ricardo is frustrated that the virus is getting stronger, so the serum doesn't work. Angrily, Guzman tells Ricardo to call for help, but Ricardo claims no one will come for them. Meanwhile, Nick watches the infected attacking from the security footage. Ricardo plans to return to the lab, telling Guzman's group to stay in the dining room. However, Lucas pleads with Ricardo, saying he gave them what they wanted. Still, Ricardo leaves. Afterward, Guzman confronts Lucas about his words, so Lucas confesses that he gave Ricardo a blood sample from the apartment building. Guzman angrily slams Lucas to the wall, and Angela starts cussing him out. The old woman tries to stop their fight, but Angela lashes out, revealing that the woman's entire family is dead. Guzman stops the argument, stressing that if the food is infected, they're already in danger. He suggests going to the bridge and arming themselves with anything from the kitchen. As they gather weapons, Angela stares at the infected Edwin, recalling her traumatic evening in the apartment building. The group cautiously walks down the corridors but freezes when Guzman hears footsteps. The group backs up just as an infected soldier rushes forward. Guzman stabs it in the head and takes its gun to shoot it. In the engine room, Jesus sees an infected soldier, so he fends for himself but accidentally hits one of the ship's pipes, which bursts. At the stairs, Lucas gets tackled by an infected soldier. Suddenly, an infected monkey tries to burst through the vents, so Lucas holds back both enemies at once. At the bridge, Ortega notices the oil pressure dropping. Meanwhile, Jesus is busy beating an infected worker with a wrench. In the hallway, Guzman shoots the infected soldier and monkey but runs out of ammunition. Lucas notices the old woman missing, so he volunteers to look for her. Guzman tells Lucas it's too risky, but Lucas wants to make up for giving Ricardo the infected sample. Guzman and Angela soon arrive at the bridge, but Ortega refuses to let them in, worried that they're infected. Still, Nick ignores him and lets them inside. Right away, Guzman tells Ortega to pilot the ship back home, but Ortega tells him they're losing oil, so he has to shut off the engine to prevent a fire. Instead, they can use the auxiliary motor, but they can only open it from the engine room, so Ortega calls Jesus. Then, Guzman asks Nick to hack into the doctor's computers for answers, so Nick sends the footage from Angela's camera to the doctors to connect to their computers. Meanwhile, Ricardo figures that the virus mutates in every host. Therefore, they need the original strain to create a serum. However, they don't have the original host from the apartment, so he gives up. Following protocol, he plans to start the self-destruct timer for the ship. However, they receive the video from Nick, so the assistant doctor stops Ricardo. Back at the bridge, Nick gains access to Ricardo's computer, so Guzman looks through the files. Angela points to the reporters about the first infected girl in the apartment, Tristana. She recalls news clippings from the apartment about Tristana becoming possessed by a demon. The file suggests that Tristana was admitted for medical care, and her doctor was Ricardo. At the lab, they watched a video of how the emaciated Tristana captured Angela and transferred the parasite into her. Ricardo realizes that the parasite must have immunized Angela from the virus to keep her as a host. Determined, Ricardo commands his fellow doctors to get the parasite out of Angela. Meanwhile, Lucas finds the old woman, but she's already infected, so he shoots her. The noise alerts other infected people, so Lucas locks the door to trap them. Behind him, Ricardo and his men pull a gun on him. When Jesus doesn't answer from the engine room, Guzman and Angela volunteer to turn on the auxiliary motor themselves. Just then, Lucas arrives, so Nick opens the door for him, only to realize that he's with Ricardo's men. Ricardo explains that Angela is carrying the parasite, yet when the soldiers try to take her, Guzman and Ortega hold Ricardo at gunpoint. Ricardo is unfazed, reasoning that it's the only way to make a serum, while Guinard assures them that they won't harm her. Ricardo points out that as a fellow doctor, Guzman should understand. After much thought, Guzman finally relents. Angela is dragged to a table, screaming while Ricardo pulls up her shirt to find the parasite in her torso. As they pin Angela down for the extraction, Ricardo asks for towels, so Guinard goes to fetch them from the bathroom but finds an infected Goro inside. Guinard attempts to close the door but fails, so Goro grabs Guinard until a soldier helps him. While the soldiers are busy shooting Goro, Angela breaks away and steals the scalpel to escape. With Guinard bitten, he begs that they can still make an antiviral. Still, Ricardo has him killed. Meanwhile, Ortega goes outside to jump off the ship in despair. Guzman tells Ricardo to call for help, but Ricardo won't go home until they have a serum, so he leaves to find Angela. Without a captain, Guzman tells Nick to steer the ship, but he refuses to go down an engine room. Due to their lack of weapons, Nick suggests taking fishing equipment from the foredeck, so Guzman and Lucas go outside. Nick watches the events from his computer while Ricardo is getting updates about Angela's location. Driven to survive, Angela takes an emergency axe to break the cameras. Nick contacts her via radio from a nearby body and tells her to stop breaking the cameras so he can help her. He warns Angela of Ricardo's oncoming group, but instead of running, she loosens the door of Edwin's storage before hiding. When Ricardo's men arrive, Edwin ambushes them. Though his soldier asks for help, Ricardo backs away to safety while the assistant doctor hits Edwin with a fire extinguisher. Angela pulls Ricardo and holds the scalpel to his neck. To prove her innocence, she bites Ricardo's hand, telling him to check it for the virus. After the soldier locks Edwin in a room, the assistant doctor runs away in fear. Ricardo comes out and tells the soldiers that he can leave, but the soldier notices the bite on Ricardo's hand. Suddenly, the assistant doctor runs back with more infected men chasing him. Knowing that he'll be killed, Ricardo locks them there and leaves. Afterward, Ricardo checks himself for an infection. Meanwhile, Angela asks Nick for the lab code, so he tells her that Guzman taught him how to check it from the security tapes. After the analysis, Ricardo sees that his blood test is negative. Suddenly, Angela holds him at knife point, insisting that she's not infected. While listening to their conversation, Nick gets up to leave the bridge just as Guzman and Lucas arrive with harpoons and an outboard motor. Nick tells them that Angela is clean, so Guzman plans to save her while the others work on the auxiliary engine. Desperate, Angela forces Ricardo to announce her innocence to the ship, but he refuses. Guzman arrives and Ricardo insists that the parasite made Angela immune, knowing that she's its best way to escape. However, Angela turns the table to Guzman, asking why he wanted the laboratory code from Nick. During the blackout, Angela points out that Guzman came from the laboratory when they encountered each other, concluding that he freed the monkey. Angela recalls that they had a minute left before the apartment was destroyed, implying that the parasite transferred to him when he saved her. Finally, Guzman confesses. While they argue, Ricardo starts the self-destruct sequence that'll detonate in 20 minutes. With Guzman distracted by the self-destruct announcement, Angela tases him, but he doesn't stay down. Guzman corners her until she falls through an opening and closes the trapdoors on her. In the darkness, Angela struggles until she finds a lantern, realizing that she's in the storage unit. She finds dozens of cages that contain dead, bloodied monkeys. A caged, infected monkey suddenly goes on a rampage, alerting other monkeys who have escaped. Angela crawls under a fence and escapes on a ladder. Meanwhile, Nick and Lucas head to the engine room when an infected man ambushes them. Lucas rams the infected with his motor and decapitates him. Nick scrambles to open the engine as Lucas deals with an infected Jesus. He shoots a harpoon at Jesus' head, but more enemies appear. Lucas gets tackled by 2 infected soldiers, and Nick backs away in fear. When he hears the timer for self-destruction, Nick takes the outboard motor and leaves. Suddenly, Nick appears behind him and threatens him into telling him where Angela is. Ricardo doesn't know, but instead shows him the inflatable raft in his bag, which they can use to escape. Ricardo tells Nick to focus on himself, but Nick knocks him out and takes the bag. Nick hears shuffling through the vents and readies his motor. When Angela drops down, she immediately helps him hold the motor to the vent, grinding all the monkeys that encounter it. Seeing infected men coming, they hide inside the dining room. While waiting for the enemies to pass, Nick stresses that they need to leave before time runs out. However, they left the outboard motor outside. Suddenly, Guzman knocks out Nick. He then tackles Angela and forces her mouth open to transfer the parasite back. Before doing so, Nick manages to shoot him with the harpoon. As the parasite goes back inside Guzman's body, Nick and Angela run, grabbing the motor on the way. With the infected on their trail, they exit to the deck and climb a net. Nick throws the raft into the water and tells Angela to jump, but she's too scared. While Nick cuts the net to hold off the infected, Angela holds onto the bowsprit but soon falls to the water. Before the infected could get to Nick, he jumps down the water with the motor and gets on the raft. However, he can't see Angela anywhere. Nick calls out to her until Angela resurfaces. He pulls her to safety, then desperately starts the outboard engine, just as the ship explodes. Unknown to them, the parasite falls into the water and enters the fish's mouth. When they return safely to land, Angela and Nick take a taxi where the driver assumes they've just been to a wild party.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.